we need to remember the first thing is that binge eating, the act of binge eating, doesn't mean you're broken, quote unquote, or you don't have enough willpower. We need to always remember that binge eating or having any urge to binge eat is a symptom. Welcome to the Binge Dietitian podcast. I'm Jonathan, and I'm here to help you end 24/7 food thoughts, binge eating, and actually enjoy life with food. This episode is for educational and informational purposes only, not to be substituted for medical or personalized advice. Check the link in the description for my recovery resources, and let's get straight to the episode. So we've all done it. Have you ever kept a bag of sweets, crisps, cookies, peanut butter, cereal, whatever your binge foods are, and out of nowhere, you get this intense craving to eat those foods? So you promise to yourself to only just have one bite or one piece, and then all of a sudden, you get this intense rush of how amazing it tastes. Then you have these thoughts thinking, well, I've ruined my diet now. I've been so bad. I might as well eat all of it right now so I can start again tomorrow. But this time I'll try even harder with my diet. Because tomorrow, there's going to be no temptation anymore. So you have this binge eating episode. You eat way past fullness, to the point of sometimes being sick. You eat it so quickly, probably to the point where you might not actually have any time to enjoy it. Then you think to yourself, why did I do that? All I had to do was just not have that first bite in the first place, so none of this would ever happen. So you start to chuck away all the remaining binge foods you have in the house, all of the binge triggers, all the foods that you are trying to avoid as much as possible. And fast forward to the next time you go shopping, you walk by your binge foods, just looking over there at the shelf, looking at you, you're looking at it. And you have this strange but confused look as you walk by the aisle, thinking to yourself, well, it's over there, it's right in front of me. But no, not today. If I don't buy it, I won't binge on it. And then you head home, even with no binge foods in the house. You end up ordering takeaway. The urge was just too strong. You end up eating white sugar just to get a sense of sweetness. You end up eating cookie dough. You end up eating strawberry jam, whatever is sweet. And then you end up just giving in and just ordering takeaway. Avoiding the quote-unquote bad foods is a battle you think you'll never win. So does this sound familiar? Because this could be your story or similar. But what if I told you that this was exactly my story when I struggled with binge eating urges? It's guilt fuel. So in this episode of Breaking Your Fear series, I'll discuss how we can break our fear of keeping our binge foods in the house and not at all have the urge to binge eat on all of them. And this is possible, and I am living proof. But I'm not a special case. Thousands of others who've struggled with binge eating can now keep their binge trigger foods in the house without having any urge to eat all of them in one go. Personally, for me, I just love buying things in bulk. So that means I don't have to go shopping like 3 to 4 times a week like I did before because I didn't trust myself. So I now live with my girlfriend, and we love eating our chocolate spread in the house. We empty a whole medium jar of chocolate spread in roughly 3 days. So in my weekly shop, I get 3 jars at a time, and if it was me, old me, the binge eating me, I would have no control. Those 3 jars would just disappear in just 2 days. And it might sound like lots of chocolate to keep in the house. And to me, that would have been also nightmare fuel if I was struggling with binge eating back then. So how did I get from cutting out all the binge triggers in my house and ending up eating cookie dough, white sugar, ordering takeaways, eating jam out of the jar, to now keeping a stash of 3 chocolate spread jars a week, keeping ice cream in my house and not devouring it all in one go, keeping chocolate bars in the cupboards without having any intense urge to overeat in them, and keeping cakes in my house without having the urge to just eat them all in one go. I just want to say it's very possible for you to be there, and I want you to imagine right now, what would it look like? What would it feel like to just keep these foods in your house and not have any urge? Just simply, let's say you want to have a cup of coffee in the morning or in the evening, decaf coffee ideally, so you have enough sleep. So imagine walking to your kitchen to just make yourself a decaf coffee or a cup of tea, and you walk by those binge foods, the foods that you normally binged on, and you think to yourself, huh, it's different now. I don't have any urge to binge eat. And you think to yourself, oh, that's really strange. I used to lose control over all these foods, but now I don't feel anything. I'm so focused on just simply having my coffee, and that's it. And whilst it might seem like a really difficult, unrealistic dream for you, it is really possible, and I'll show you how. But let's start with this. First, we need to recognize why are we having these intense cravings to binge eat in the first place? We need to remember the first thing is that binge eating, the act of binge eating, doesn't mean you're broken, quote unquote, or you don't have enough willpower. We need to always remember that binge eating or having any urge to binge eat is a symptom. It's a symptom of deprivation. It's a sign that your body is deprived. So we need to stop and think, okay, are we depriving our body of these foods? Are you depriving your body of hunger or psychological fulfillment, satisfaction? Are you depriving yourself of these binge triggers in your house? Let's talk about the two biggest binge triggers to why you might be losing control and binge eating on these foods. These two binge triggers are massively important, and they're called physical restriction, number one, and number two, mental restriction. So let's start with physical restriction. How can we get rid of physical restriction? So are you restricting how much you eat? Are you only eating maybe too little calories? Are you maybe skipping meals? Are you ignoring your hunger and fighting against it? Are you eating your meals, but when you finish your meals, you're not feeling comfortably satisfied? It might sound obvious that being hungry can lead to binge eating episodes, and you might be thinking, oh, I'm not hungry, especially if I had a binge last night. There's no reason for me to be hungry. But I want you to think, let's go back in time. What thoughts went around your head the moment after a binge? For me, I can say that I got this really determined look, thinking my life will change with absolute certainty the moment I start to skip breakfast the next day, have a tiny lunch, probably have a small dinner to make up for all the calories I've eaten during the binge last night. That is essentially physical restriction. You're ignoring your hunger cues and fighting back what your body wants. Yeah, you might have binged last night, and you might not feel hungry in the morning, but hunger will come back. And the moment you try to fight back against it and try to chase weight loss, that is physical restriction. What we need to recognize is that we can't chase weight loss whilst we're chasing binge eating recovery. They're complete opposites. With binge eating recovery, it's all about telling your body, okay, there's food here. I don't need to have these intense cravings. Your body will think, okay, time to turn down these alarm bells. I'm getting food regularly and consistently. So there's no need for me to ramp up those hunger hormones. I can turn down those alarms and just relax now. I can eat regularly and re-regulate all those hunger hormones. And in order for us to get rid of the first trigger of binge eating urges, physical restriction, what we need to do is that we need to eat until we're comfortably full, consistently, with the key word being consistently. So what does comfortably full look like? So comfortably full looks like being a 7 or 8 out of 10 in the fullness scale. So with 10 being Christmas dinner full, really, really full, where you're so sick, really uncomfortable, you can't even lie down. And 0 in the hunger scale being nauseously hungry, ravenous. We need to be 7 or 8 out of 10 full in that area consistently throughout the day to ensure that we're not having intense cravings, we're not veering into physical restriction. The closer you are to 10 out of 10 full, you'll start skipping meals. And the closer you are to 0 out of 10 full, you start to have these increased urges for binge eating episodes. So you'll be required to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner with snacks in between, as long as you're keeping yourself consistently at a 7 or 8 out of 10 full. So let's say you had breakfast Okay, you had breakfast maybe then at 10 o'clock. Okay, maybe I'm a 4 out of 10 full. So I'll have maybe a piece of toast with peanut butter. And then that brings me up back to 8 out of 10 full. So it's all about topping yourself up consistently. You're telling your body and you're teaching your body that food is available and this will re-regulate your hunger hormones. Your fullness hormone, leptin, will increase and your hunger hormone, ghrelin, will decrease. And as you're listening to this right now, you might be thinking that you're going to gain lots of weight. And I just want to say that this fear of gaining weight is very valid. I understand how you're thinking, and I've been there. You might feel like you'll start eating regular meals consistently, and you'll never stop eating. You won't ever be full. You won't re-regulate your hunger hormones. But we need to trust our body. Our body is smarter than our brains, as strange as it sounds. If your body senses consistent meals regularly, it will start to re-regulate its hunger cues and turn off those binge eating or overeating alarms. It's the only and main reason how people recover from binge eating. It's all about telling your body that there's abundance of food. We need to recognize that when we've been dieting for so long, our body is at a deprived state already. So it is completely normal that you are going to eat a little more than you'll think you'll do, but don't be alarmed. You're refueling your body. You're escaping this deprivation. Remember, if you're having any intense urges for binge eating, this is a symptom that your body is already deprived. No matter what body weight you are, how high of a body weight you are, or how low of body weight you are, no matter where you are, even if you binged last night, no matter how many times you binge in the week, you can still be deprived. Our body is either in feast or famine mode, and we need to find that balance of just being in the middle. And a little caveat I have to note, which is pretty important really, is that when we struggle with dieting for so long, a normal meal portion, which is enough to make us comfortably full, might be different from what you expect a normal meal portion would look like. Because diet culture tells us that we should have smaller portions, eat less. But remember that the goal is to restore your hunger cues, to teach your body that there is abundance of food and food is here. Research actually shows that eating regular meals consistently leads to weight maintenance because you're just simply splitting the meals and calories throughout the day instead of eating very little in one portion of the day and then eating so much in the evening. Episodes of binge eating and restricting can actually lead to even more weight gain because your body's worried that there's not enough food, so it's going to ramp up those hunger hormones. So, to eliminate physical restriction, eat regular meals consistently. So let's jump straight to the second binge trigger, mental restriction. Do you ever have moments where you feel like you're craving a certain food, but you ignore it? For example, you might actually crave a couple of cookies, but you ignore it because you think they're quote-unquote bad or fattening. But then you just have a banana instead to chase this fullness. But still, you have this little itch throughout the day that you might need something very sweet, just like a cookie. So you ignore it again, and you have something else instead of that craving of a cookie. Then all of a sudden, these mini ignored cravings, not just a cookie, but if you go out throughout the day, you'll have many little cravings for certain things. Imagine that multiplied by maybe 10, 20, then you have this binge episode coming on. So this is mental restriction. You're ignoring what your body really wants for satisfaction. By the way, just a quick break from the podcast to let you know of my free hunger regulation webinar series, which is in the link in the description of this podcast. There's also an ebook version if you're more of a reader than a watcher. This is the perfect resource I wish I had when I struggled with binge eating years ago, which is used to guide you from everything you need to know, from why we binge, what are the binge triggers, and the eating pattern to stop binge eating. Because when we've been struggling with binge eating for so long, you and your body lose touch of what normal hunger and normal fullness is. You're constantly on feast or famine mode. So head to the link in the description of this podcast for the free hunger regulation resources to have a clear game plan to tackle binge eating for good. Anyway, let's get straight back to the episode. The key to recovering from mental restriction is permission. I want you to not think of a pink elephant. What did you think of? A pink elephant. So, this is a really good example of a way of demonstrating that we can't ignore what we hear or what our body thinks. It's been backed by countless studies that ignoring our cravings can lead to binge eating episodes and overeating episodes. This phenomenon is called the forbidden fruit phenomenon, where we essentially crave what we can't have. You might think that you'll lose control over eating the foods you love or your binge trigger foods, but remember, if we're eliminating physical restriction, keeping ourselves at a 7 or 8 out of 10 fullness, then if we listen to our cravings and have that cookie, for example, you might not feel the intense urge or any urge to have another one. Maybe you might have another one, and that's completely okay, but you're not gonna have this intense urge to binge eat. So when we're adhering and getting rid of physical restriction, we're being full. But when we're getting rid of mental restriction, we're being satisfied. The key to binge eating is to be consistently full and satisfied. And this might be feeling scary for you once again, and that's completely normal. I want you to know that recovery is really scary. Big changes are scary. Chasing different goals is scary. And that's completely normal. And what you're feeling right now is completely valid. And if ever you're feeling really nervous about something, on a side note, feel free to just message me if you want someone to talk to on Instagram at Binge Dietitian. So, this might seem really scary if you're going to listen to your cravings. So if you really want to feel a bit more comfortable, a little tip I would give is, after eating a meal, like let's say your lunch, if you're having this craving for a cookie, then have the craving as a dessert after lunch. So you can sit comfortably and just feel and be mindful of this feeling of, okay, I've eaten the cookie, but I'm not extremely hungry. I'm not wanting probably like 5 more or 10 more cookies. So building trust, it's all about building trust. At first it's going to be scary, but the more you start to build trust with these binge trigger foods, it'll only get easier from there. So that's getting rid of mental restriction. And one final thing I need to mention, which is pretty important as a bonus, is that we need to eliminate this idea that there are good foods and bad foods. This can contribute to the idea that whenever we eat a food we consider good, okay, that's good. But whenever we eat a food we consider bad, we start to have this dread that we failed, we're a complete failure, that we have no willpower, that we're lazy. But food is not meant to be a constant shift of being good this day, good bad day, good in the morning, bad in the evening. Food is simply food. We shouldn't give the permission of food to have any morality. If you're giving food morals or putting a moral value on it, then you're putting it in a pedestal. You're giving it power to control you. When we're meant to simply control food, we need to recognize that when we put food on a pedestal by restricting it, making it a forbidden food, then, like we mentioned earlier, then we're simply going to crave it even more. It's a forbidden fruit analogy. It's a forbidden fruit phenomenon. But when we eat foods regularly, starting to build trust around them, getting rid of physical restriction and mental restriction, being consistently full and satisfied, then you're taking away that power of this food being forbidden and turning it into a neutral food. So that's the key to not losing control over these kinds of foods in your kitchen. They're not forbidden foods every time you walk by them. They're simply neutral foods. You don't really think much of them because you're having them regularly. You've built this trust with your body and with these foods that, okay, I can trust in my body that I'm keeping myself full and satisfied. I know my body has no reason to binge eat because it recognizes that there's no famine. We're just finding this state of abundance regularly. So, in summary, give yourself the unconditional permission to eat and listen to your internal hunger cues. Unconditional permission will not lead you to eat cookies all day. You'll only do that if you're halfway giving permission. But complete, unconditional permission is eating regular meals and snacks consistently to stay full throughout the day and having the foods you crave to stay satisfied. Be full and satisfied, not just one or the other. So it will feel like a deep dive, but if you need any advice or if you need any support, always message me on Instagram at Binge Dietitian, or just email me if you want at bingedietitian@gmail.com if you want to ever discuss something. So if you enjoyed this episode of Breaking Your Fear series, I would really appreciate it if you rated this episode very well so other people can see it. So we can help other people who are struggling with binge eating and struggling with their relationship with food and struggling with the idea of they can keep foods that they used to binge on in their house and not lose control over them. Anyway, I just want to note that I now have a new newsletter where I'll be giving out free binge eating recovery resources every week. Because when I struggled with binge eating, my motivation fluctuated so much. I don't know about you, but I only searched for binge eating recovery tips online only when I was at my lowest, which was probably not the best time because I was emotionally vulnerable to skip meals, ignore my hunger, cut out foods, ignore friends and family, jump on the next really restrictive diet, and so much more. But having this consistent reminder that I'm doing well, I have these evidence-based tips I can learn more about every week, is what I wished I had to keep me accountable and get me out of binge eating urges much earlier. It would have helped me so much. I'm sharing all the advice I wish I knew in this newsletter when I struggled with binge eating, and things I would just do instead, or resources I would listen to, learn about, just so I can recover from binge eating maybe a year faster, several months faster, several weeks faster. So sign up to the newsletter for free in the link in the description of this podcast. I also have lots of resources in the description of this podcast to how I can help you, ranging from one-to-one coaching, my self-paced online course, my free hunger regulation webinars and ebook, and my social media pages. So check that out. So once again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time in the next episode, friend. Struggling with binge eating? Gain access to my exclusive self-paced binge eating freedom course found in the link in the description of this podcast. My course is everything I wish I knew when I struggled with binge eating, but it's all wrapped up into one easy to understand platform. You'll finally learn how to put an end to binge eating and put an end to food dictating everything you do, controlling your life. Access it now in the link in the description of this podcast.